My honor was not yielded but conquered. These are the defiant words attributed to Cleopatra VII, the last pharaoh of Egypt. Her declaration resonates across 2,000 years, capturing the essence of a woman who refused to be a pawn. Cleopatra's story is a narrative of ambition, intelligence, and survival. She commanded armies, charmed powerful men, and ruled a rich kingdom. Her name calls up images of wealth, romance, and a tragic end. She remains one of history's most compelling figures, a source of endless fascination. The truth is far more complex than the legends suggest. This documentary will explore the real woman behind the legend, a ruler of immense intellect and a skilled diplomat. We'll journey to Alexandria, a dazzling center of culture. Her story is a testament to her resilience in the face of immense challenges. It was this volatile environment that forged Cleopatra into the formidable leader she would become. Cleopatra's significance extends beyond her famous romances with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. She was, first and foremost, the ruler of Egypt for more than 2 decades and a capable administrator. She stabilized a faltering economy and restored ancient religious traditions. Unlike her predecessors, she learned the Egyptian language, earning the respect of her subjects. Understanding her requires setting aside narratives crafted by her enemies, like the Romans. She inherited a kingdom in debt, but preserved Egypt's independence through clever diplomacy. Her goals were to secure her family's dynasty and restore Egypt to its former glory. By examining these aspects, we gain a richer portrait of a woman whose intelligence was her most powerful weapon. Cleopatra's story is fundamentally intertwined with a pivotal moment in world history, the death of the Roman Republic and the birth of the Roman Empire. She was not a bystander to this transformation. She was a central figure in its dramatic unfolding. Her life and reign represent the final chapter of the Hellenistic Age, the period of Greek influence that began with the conquests of Alexander the Great. Cleopatra was the last ruler of the Ptolemaic dynasty, the final successor to Alexander's legacy in Egypt. With her death, the 3,000-year-old era of the pharaohs came to a definitive end, and Egypt was absorbed into the new Roman Empire. Her world was one of clashing cultures and competing ambitions. Alexandria, her capital, was a vibrant hub where Egyptian traditions, Greek traditions, and Jewish traditions converged. It was a city of immense wealth, home to the Great Library and the Lighthouse, one of the wonders of the ancient world. Yet this glittering prize was coveted by Rome, whose internal power struggles frequently spilled over into the eastern Mediterranean. Cleopatra had to navigate this treacherous landscape from a young age, first battling her own siblings for the throne and then contending with the most powerful generals Rome had ever produced. Her reign was a constant tightrope walk, balancing Egyptian sovereignty against Roman supremacy. To fully appreciate her legacy, we have to understand the stakes. For Cleopatra, this was not just a personal struggle for survival, it was a fight for the preservation of her kingdom's independence and its unique cultural identity. She saw herself as the defender of a civilization far older and in many ways more sophisticated than that of the Romans. Her alliance with Mark Antony was not just a love affair, it was a political vision for a new kind of power structure in the East, one that could rival the dominance of Rome. It was a bold and audacious gamble, a dream of an empire centered in Alexandria, not Rome. Ultimately, her gamble failed. The forces aligned against her, led by the cool and calculating Octavian, proved too strong. But the fall of her kingdom does not diminish the significance of her efforts. Her story is a timeless lesson in power politics and the enduring human spirit. She remains a symbol of defiance against overwhelming odds, a queen who dared to challenge the course of history. As we delve into the key moments of her life, from her audacious meeting with Caesar to her final tragic moments in her mausoleum, we'll uncover why Cleopatra, the last pharaoh of Egypt, continues to hold such a powerful grip on our collective imagination. To understand Cleopatra, we must first understand her family, the Ptolemies, Greeks from Macedonia. Their story begins with Alexander the Great, who conquered Egypt in 332 BCE. After Alexander's death, Ptolemy the Soter claimed Egypt. He established Alexandria, linking the pharaohs with the Greek world. The Ptolemies ruled as Hellenistic pharaohs, blending Greek and Egyptian customs. They maintained their Greek bloodline through sibling marriage to consolidate power. The dynasty was brilliant yet flawed, presiding over wealth and culture. Egypt was a global supplier, coveted by Rome but plagued by internal decay. This was the legacy Cleopatra inherited. Cleopatra was born in 69 BCE in Alexandria, the most spectacular city in the Mediterranean world. Alexandria was a testament to the vision of Alexander the Great and the wealth of the Ptolemies. Its magnificent harbor was dominated by the legendary Pharaoh, a lighthouse counted among the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Life within the royal quarter of Alexandria was one of unimaginable luxury and intellectual richness. At the heart of this intellectual life was the museum and the legendary Great Library of Alexandria. For a young princess, this environment was a unique and powerful classroom. Her education was not just an accessory, it was her most formidable weapon. Yet this dazzling city was also a place of great danger, especially for those within the royal family. Cleopatra grew up hearing stories of relatives murdering one another to secure the throne. This gilded cage taught her a harsh but vital lesson from a very young age. Power was never secure. Cleopatra VII was born into a kingdom on the brink of collapse. Her name was a traditional Macedonian name meaning glory of the father. This linked her to her father, Ptolemy XIV, a weak ruler seen as a puppet of Rome. The people despised him, and when Rome annexed Cyprus they rioted, driving him into exile. Cleopatra's sister, Berenice IV, took the throne. Cleopatra witnessed firsthand how quickly power could shift. She saw her father reduced to begging in Rome. He returned with a Roman army, executing Berenice. Cleopatra, now a teenager, became co-regent, understanding that true power flowed from Rome. Cleopatra's education was exceptionally broad and remarkably practical. It went far beyond traditional aristocratic pursuits. The core of her learning was geared towards the demands of rulership. Living in Alexandria, she had access to the world's foremost scholars. One of her most significant accomplishments was her mastery of languages. She was the first Ptolemaic ruler to learn the Egyptian language, a brilliant political move. This linguistic skill was a powerful diplomatic asset, giving her an enormous advantage. It demonstrated a worldly intelligence and a strategic mind. She studied the reigns of her ancestors, learning from their successes and failures. Her education was a synthesis of theory and practice, making her uniquely prepared for the challenges she would face. The Ptolemaic dynasty was infamous for its internal strife, and Cleopatra's generation was no exception. The family tree was a tangled web of ambition and violence. Cleopatra was one of at least 5 children of Ptolemy XII. She had 2 older sisters, Cleopatra VI, Tryphena, and Berenice IV, and 2 younger brothers, both named Ptolemy. From the moment they were born, these siblings were not just family, they were potential rivals for the most powerful throne in the Hellenistic world. The practice of sibling marriage, intended to preserve the purity of the royal bloodline, only intensified this dynamic. A brother was not just a brother, he was a potential co-ruler, a potential husband, and a potential enemy. When Ptolemy XII died in the spring of 51 BCE, his will set the stage for the next inevitable conflict. He named his eldest surviving child, the 18-year-old Cleopatra, and her younger brother, the 10-year-old Ptolemy XIII, as joint heirs to the throne. According to custom, they were to marry each other and rule together. This arrangement was fraught with tension from the very beginning. An ambitious and intelligent young woman like Cleopatra was unlikely to be content sharing power with a child king. The court quickly fractured into factions, with one group supporting the charismatic young queen and another coalescing around the boy king. The power behind Ptolemy XIII's throne was a trio of influential figures: his tutor, Theodotus of Chios, a general named Achilles, and a eunuch named Pothinus, who served as the regent. These men saw Cleopatra as a threat to their own influence and control over the kingdom. They sought to sideline her, promoting Ptolemy XIII as the sole ruler. For 3 years, a tense power struggle played out within the palace in Alexandria. Cleopatra initially held the upper hand, issuing official documents and minting coins with her face alone, a clear sign of her intention to rule in her own right. She refused to be a passive queen or a mere figurehead for her brother's handlers. This defiance could not last. The forces aligned against her were too powerful within the confines of the court. By 48 BCE, the faction led by Pothinus had gained complete control. Fearing for her life, Cleopatra was forced to flee Alexandria. She made her way east, to the deserts of Syria, a queen in exile, but she was not defeated. This was merely a setback. Far from the intrigues of the palace, she began to gather her own army, determined to return and reclaim her birthright. The stage was now set for a full-blown civil war between sister and brother, queen and king. In 51 BCE, Ptolemy XIV died, leaving his kingdom to his children, Cleopatra and Ptolemy XIII, who were to rule and marry. On paper, it was meant to provide stability. In reality, it was a recipe for conflict, as the throne was far from secure, burdened by debt and Roman influence. Cleopatra, intelligent and ambitious, moved to assert her dominance. Official documents bore her name alone, and coins were minted with her portrait. Her actions challenged the established court, who preferred a young king they could control. The palace divided, and economic pressures stirred discontent, further destabilizing the throne. Cleopatra's opposition came from the powerful men controlling her young brother. A trio formed a shadow council, ruling in Ptolemy XIII's name. Pothinus, chief minister, controlled finances. Achillas commanded the army. Theodotus of Chios was the king's tutor. Together they sought to disempower Cleopatra, seeing her intellect as a threat. In 48 BCE, the council consolidated control. Accusing Cleopatra of plotting against her brother, they drove her from Alexandria. Cleopatra fled, a fugitive at 21. Driven from Alexandria, Cleopatra refused defeat. In Syria, she tapped into her father's old alliances and began raising a mercenary army, her will undiminished, her ambition sharpened. She transformed from royal exile to military leader, learning the art of war and strategy firsthand. At Pelusium, her forces faced her brother's army in a tense standoff, while Alexandria's rulers tried to erase her from history. But Cleopatra's determination, and the looming arrival of Rome, would soon upend their plans. As Roman civil war spilled into Egypt, the fate of the Ptolemaic throne would be decided not just by Egyptians, but by the world's most powerful empire. As Egypt's civil war simmered, Rome's own conflict exploded. Caesar defeated Pompey, who fled to Egypt seeking sanctuary. Ptolemy's advisors, hoping to please Caesar, murdered Pompey and presented his severed head as a gift. Caesar, appalled by the dishonor, turned against the boy king's faction and installed himself in Alexandria's palace. Declaring Rome the executor of Egypt's royal will, Caesar demanded to see Cleopatra, the exiled queen. The Shadow Council's gamble had backfired. Instead of securing Caesar's favor, they'd invited the world's most powerful man to decide Egypt's future. Cleopatra's opportunity for a dramatic return had arrived. Caesar's arrival ignited open war in Alexandria. Besieged in the palace by Ptolemy's army, Caesar's small force fought desperately as the city burned. Some say even the great library suffered. Cleopatra, blocked by enemy lines, devised a daring plan to reach Caesar. With the help of Apollodorus, she was smuggled into the palace concealed in a carpet. Her audacity and intelligence captivated Caesar, forging a powerful alliance and a romance. Ptolemy, realizing he'd been outmaneuvered, raged as the war escalated. But Cleopatra had won Caesar's support, the key to reclaiming her throne. Cleopatra's legendary entrance, hidden in a carpet delivered to Caesar, was more than a stunt. It was a masterstroke of political theater, showcasing her courage and ingenuity. Apollodorus, posing as a merchant, smuggled her past guards into Caesar's private chambers. Unrolled before the Roman general, Cleopatra appeared not as a supplicant, but as a queen who had outwitted her enemies. This unforgettable act cemented her reputation as a leader who understood that perception could be as powerful as armies. In that moment, Cleopatra seized control of her destiny. Caesar, seasoned and unflappable, was stunned by Cleopatra's boldness. Their meeting was a clash of brilliant minds. She argued her case with intellect and vision, offering Rome a stable, prosperous Egypt. Cleopatra presented herself as a partner, not a pawn, her charm matched by substance and political savvy. That night, alliance and romance intertwined, sealing their pact. By morning, Ptolemy found his sister at Caesar's side, outmaneuvered and outmatched. War was now his only answer. The alliance between Cleopatra and Caesar in Alexandria was a turning point. It infuriated Ptolemy XIII, who appealed to the people, inciting them against Cleopatra and the Romans. The Alexandrian War intensified. Forces loyal to the king besieged Caesar and Cleopatra. Inside the palace, Caesar and Cleopatra became partners. Their relationship was a blend of strategy, companionship, and affection. Together they planned their strategy, their bond deepening amidst the constant danger. This solidified their partnership, creating mutual respect. Caesar declared Cleopatra and Ptolemy XIII must rule jointly, but favored Cleopatra. The war continued. Caesar and Cleopatra fought for survival, awaiting Roman reinforcements. The stalemate was finally broken in March of 47 BCE. Roman relief forces, commanded by one of Caesar's allies, Mithridates of Pergamon, arrived by land from Syria. They fought their way into Egypt and advanced towards Alexandria. Caesar, in a bold and decisive move, took a portion of his legions, left the besieged palace, and sailed them out of the harbor to link up with the approaching army. Now in command of a much larger force, he confronted the Egyptian royal army in a final decisive engagement. The battle took place on the west bank of the Nile River, a clash that would determine the future of Egypt and seal the fate of its young king. The battle was a complete victory for Caesar's veteran legions. The Egyptian army, though larger, was outmaneuvered and crushed by the superior discipline and tactics of the Romans. In the chaos of the retreat, Ptolemy XIII attempted to flee across the river on a barge. But the boat was overcrowded with his fleeing soldiers and it capsized, plunging the young king into the waters of the Nile. Weighed down by his golden armor, the 13-year-old Pharaoh drowned. His body was recovered later, identified by the royal armor he wore. With his death, the organized resistance against Caesar and Cleopatra collapsed. The Alexandrian War was over. Caesar marched back into Alexandria, not as a besieged guest, but as an undisputed conqueror. The people of the city who had so fiercely resisted him now surrendered. He entered the capital in triumph with Cleopatra at his side. He had fulfilled his promise to her. Her primary rival was dead, his faction was defeated, and the throne of Egypt was now hers to claim. To maintain the appearance of Ptolemaic tradition and to placate any remaining factions, Caesar decreed that Cleopatra should marry her youngest brother, the 12-year-old Ptolemy XIV. They were officially proclaimed joint rulers of Egypt, but there was no question about who held the real power. Cleopatra's authority was now absolute, guaranteed by the might of Roman legions. Her gamble had paid off spectacularly. From a desperate exile, she had become the undisputed ruler of the richest kingdom in the Mediterranean. She had not only reclaimed her birthright, but had also forged a powerful alliance with the most influential man in the world. The audacious queen who had arrived in a carpet was now firmly seated on the throne of the pharaohs. Her victory was complete, and a new chapter of her reign, under the watchful protection of her Roman lover and patron, was about to begin. With the Alexandrian War concluded, Cleopatra's authority was finally secure. Julius Caesar had crushed her enemies and placed her back on the throne of Egypt. To present an image of stability, she was formally married to her younger brother. This was a marriage in name only. The young boy was a political necessity, while Cleopatra reigned as the undisputed ruler. Her name once again appeared alone on official decrees, a clear message to all that she was in command. Her first task was to heal a kingdom scarred by months of brutal civil war. Cleopatra embarked on a program of restoration, working to repair the damage to her city. She needed to reassure her people that a period of peace and prosperity had begun. Caesar remained in Egypt for several months. He left 3 Roman legions stationed in the country to protect Cleopatra. In reality, these legions were a clear symbol of where ultimate power now lay. Cleopatra understood her kingdom's autonomy was now more fragile than ever. This period marked the true beginning of her effective reign. She was no longer just a claimant to the throne, but its occupant. She now had the opportunity to govern and to shape the future of her kingdom. The young queen had won, and she was now ready to rule in her own right. Before his departure from Egypt, Julius Caesar embarked on a remarkable journey with Cleopatra. For several weeks, they took a grand tour up the Nile River, a lavish and ostentatious display of power and partnership. They traveled on a magnificent royal barge, a floating palace said to be over 90 meters long, complete with dining halls, private chambers, and shrines. It was accompanied by a flotilla of some 400 other ships carrying courtiers, servants, and a contingent of Roman soldiers for security. This was not a simple holiday. It was a carefully orchestrated piece of political theater, designed to showcase the new queen to her subjects and to demonstrate the powerful alliance she commanded with Rome. The procession moved slowly south, stopping at major towns and religious centers along the way. For the people of Egypt living along the riverbanks, it was a spectacular sight. They saw their queen, not as a remote Greek ruler in Alexandria, but as a pharaoh participating in the lifeblood of their nation. It allowed Cleopatra to present herself alongside the mighty Roman general, reinforcing her authority. It sent a clear message to any would-be rebels or discontented priests that she had the unwavering support of Caesar. For Caesar, it was an opportunity to witness firsthand the immense agricultural wealth and ancient wonders of the kingdom he now effectively controlled, a land far older and different than anything he knew. The journey was also deeply personal. Away from the political intrigues of Alexandria and the pressures of Rome, the cruise offered Caesar and Cleopatra a period of relative tranquility. It allowed their relationship to deepen beyond a mere political alliance. They were two powerful individuals, intellectually matched, who shared a vision of a new world order. They could discuss philosophy, history and strategy while drifting past the colossal temples of Luxor and Karnak. This shared experience forged a bond that would have lasting consequences. It was during this idyllic journey that Cleopatra became pregnant with Caesar's child, a development that would intertwine their destinies forever. When they finally returned to Alexandria, the political landscape had been reshaped. The crews had successfully cemented Cleopatra's status throughout Egypt. The people had seen their queen, radiant and powerful, endorsed by the world's most famous general. It was a masterclass in public relations, blending the pageantry of an ancient pharaonic progress with the undeniable reality of Roman military might. Caesar had seen the source of Egypt's wealth, and Cleopatra had demonstrated her popular support. The journey was over, but its purpose had been achieved. Cleopatra's reign was legitimized, and her connection to Caesar was now stronger and more complex than ever. In 47 BCE, Cleopatra gave birth to a son, Ptolemy Caesar, known as Caesarion. For Cleopatra, Caesarion embodied her grandest ambitions, linking the pharaohs to Rome. She envisioned a new dynasty ruling a Greco-Roman empire from Alexandria. Cleopatra associated herself with Isis, presenting Caesarion as Horus, the divine heir. Temple reliefs depicted her as Isis nursing Caesarion, solidifying her legitimacy as a divinely ordained pharaoh. Caesarion's existence presented complications in Rome. Though Caesar acknowledged him, Roman law didn't recognize him, yet he posed a threat to the political order. Cleopatra raised her son in Alexandria, a symbol of her ambition. With her political power consolidated, Cleopatra turned her sharp intellect to the practical business of governing. Egypt, for all its legendary wealth, was facing some pretty significant economic challenges. Decades of mismanagement by her predecessors, plus the immense bribes paid to Rome and the cost of the recent civil war, had really left the treasury depleted. On top of that, the kingdom was still recovering from a series of low Nile floods that had caused famine early in her reign. Cleopatra implemented a series of, pragmatic reforms aimed at stabilizing the economy, increasing state revenue, and ensuring the welfare of her people. She proved to be a shrewd and capable administrator, deeply involved in the details of her kingdom's management. One of her key focuses was reforming the complex and often corrupt bureaucracy that managed the country's resources. She worked to streamline tax collection, making it more efficient and, importantly, reducing the opportunities for graft among local officials. She also took steps to stabilize the Egyptian currency. Cleopatra adjusted the silver content of certain coins and issued new bronze coinage, carefully managing the monetary supply to restore confidence and facilitate trade. These weren't glamorous actions, but they were absolutely essential for the long-term health of the kingdom. Her hands-on approach really demonstrated a deep understanding of economics, a skill that set her apart from many other Hellenistic monarchs. Cleopatra also paid close attention to Egypt's greatest asset, its agriculture. The prosperity of the kingdom depended entirely on the annual flooding of the Nile and the grain it produced. She strengthened and maintained the ancient system of canals and dikes that were crucial for irrigation, making sure the land could be cultivated as effectively as possible. When another famine threatened in 41 BCE, ancient sources record that she once again implemented a system of relief, distributing grain from the royal stores to feed the hungry population and prevent the widespread social unrest that often accompanied such crises. This act of responsible governance further solidified her popularity and her image as a caring mother to her people. Beyond domestic policy, Cleopatra sought to re-establish Egypt as a major player in international trade. She worked to protect and encourage the maritime trade routes that flowed through Alexandria, connecting the Mediterranean with the Red Sea and the markets of Arabia and India. This trade in spices, silks, and other luxury goods brought immense wealth into her kingdom. Through these careful and considered reforms, Cleopatra managed to restore much of Egypt's economic vitality. She paid off some of the heavy debts to Rome and began to rebuild the kingdom's treasury, strengthening the foundations of her rule through sound and effective governance. In 46 BCE, Cleopatra traveled to Rome at Caesar's invitation, bringing their infant son, Caesarion. As the foreign mistress of Rome's most powerful man, her presence caused a sensation. Caesar showered her with honors, erecting a golden statue of her as the goddess Isis, shocking the Roman elite. She hoped Caesar would acknowledge Caesarion as his heir, legitimizing his claim in Egypt and Rome. Her time in Rome ended abruptly with Caesar's assassination on the Ides of March 44 BCE. With her protector dead, Cleopatra fled the city, her ambitions for Caesarion in ruins. She sailed back to the safety of Egypt. The assassination of Julius Caesar sent shockwaves across the Roman world and upended Cleopatra's plans. Her protector was gone, murdered by senators. With Caesar dead, Cleopatra fled Rome for Egypt. Back in Alexandria, she consolidated power, naming her son Caesarion as co-ruler. Meanwhile, Rome was tearing itself apart, with Caesar's heirs, Mark Antony and Octavian, vying for power against his assassins. They formed the Second Triumvirate. Antony took control of the East, including Egypt. Cleopatra navigated this Roman conflict, seeking to protect Egypt's sovereignty until she faced the new master of the East, Mark Antony. With the Roman world partitioned, Mark Antony summoned Cleopatra to Tarsus in 41 BCE to explain her ambiguous support during the recent civil war. This summons was a moment of great peril for Cleopatra, but she saw it as a grand opportunity. She decided to orchestrate an encounter on her own terms, designed to captivate and disarm him. She meticulously planned every detail of her arrival, preparing a spectacle that would showcase her wealth, her power, and her unique allure. She set sail for Tarsus not with fear, but with the supreme confidence of a queen about to play for the highest stakes imaginable. Cleopatra's arrival in Tarsus was a masterstroke of theatricality, an event so spectacular that it would be immortalized by historians like Plutarch and later on by Shakespeare. Instead of proceeding directly to Antony's headquarters, she sailed up the Cydnus River at dusk, turning her journey into a breathtaking pageant. She traveled on an opulent royal barge with a gilded stern and purple sails, a color reserved for royalty. The oars that propelled the vessel were made of silver, and they moved in time to the music of flutes, pipes, and lutes. The air was filled with the scent of exotic perfumes burning in censers on the deck, a fragrant cloud that announced her arrival long before she was seen. The queen herself was the centerpiece of this magnificent display. She lay on a golden couch under a canopy spangled with gold, dressed in the costume of the goddess Venus, or Aphrodite as the Greeks knew her. Antony, who liked to fashion himself as the god Dionysus, would immediately have understood the symbolism. She was not merely a mortal queen, she was a goddess coming to feast with a god. Her attendants were dressed as Nereids and Graces, the mythical handmaidens of Venus. Young boys, costumed as cupids, stood on either side of her couch, fanning her. The entire scene was a carefully constructed tableau, designed to appeal directly to Antony's love of grandeur and his own divine pretensions. News of this incredible sight spread like wildfire through Tarsus. The city's marketplace, where Antony was sitting on a tribunal to receive her, emptied as the entire population rushed to the riverbank to witness the spectacle. Antony was left sitting alone, a powerful Roman general completely upstaged by the queen he had summoned. The power dynamic had been instantly and brilliantly inverted. Instead of Cleopatra coming to him to be judged, he was now the one being invited to her. She sent a message inviting him to dine with her aboard her barge. Humbled and intrigued, Antony accepted, becoming her guest rather than her interrogator. The feast that followed was as lavish as her arrival. The dining hall on the barge glittered with gold and jewels, and the food and wine were of the finest quality. Cleopatra proved to be a witty, charming, and intelligent conversationalist, captivating Antony not just with her beauty and wealth, but with her sharp mind and political savvy. She had successfully transformed a perilous political summons into a seductive social conquest. Over the next several days, she continued to host Antony with entertainments of unparalleled magnificence. She had completely seized the initiative, dazzling Antony and laying the foundation for a partnership that would change the course of history. The meeting in Tarsus laid the groundwork for a famous partnership. Mark Antony was enchanted by Cleopatra, finding in her a beautiful woman and powerful political ally. She possessed wealth to pay his legions, a secure kingdom as his base, and a keen political mind. The alliance fused Roman military might and Egyptian resources. Antony followed Cleopatra to Alexandria, beginning their legendary affair. Beneath the revelry, a serious political and personal bond was being forged. They built trust, underpinning their powerful alliance. For Cleopatra, this partnership was the cornerstone of her new foreign policy. Their partnership was mutually beneficial, built on shared ambition and affection. Together, they envisioned a new center of power in the East, rivaling Rome. It was a political merger, a joining of two powerful figures with a shared dream of empire. Antony returned to Cleopatra in 37 BCE, marking an ambitious phase in their partnership. They had 3 children, tying Antony's future to Alexandria. Acknowledging his children further alienated him from Octavian. In 34 BCE, the donations of Alexandria occurred. Antony celebrated a Roman triumph in Alexandria, a shocking break from tradition. Antony and Cleopatra sat on golden thrones and distributed eastern territories to their children. Cleopatra was proclaimed Queen of Kings and Caesarion, King of Kings. The donations challenged Octavian and Roman authority, creating a new kingdom. Octavian portrayed Antony as a traitor, leading to civil war. The donations of Alexandria provided the perfect weapon for Antony's rival Octavian. Octavian launched a relentless propaganda campaign against Antony and Cleopatra. He depicted Antony as a man who had lost his mind and his Roman identity, controlled by a decadent foreign queen. Cleopatra was painted as a dangerous and immoral sorceress. This propaganda stirred up fear and xenophobia. Octavian seized Antony's will and read it to the Senate. The Senate stripped Antony of his powers and declared war on Cleopatra. The stage was now set for the final confrontation. War was declared, and Antony and Cleopatra mobilized their forces, including a massive fleet and a vast army. They planned to confront Octavian in Italy, establishing headquarters in Greece. Cleopatra played a central role, financing the campaign and commanding her own squadron. Octavian, with a smaller but more experienced navy led by Agrippa, disrupted Antony's supply lines with naval raids. By spring, Antony and Cleopatra were trapped near Actium, blockaded by land and sea. Despite advice to fight on land, they opted for a desperate sea battle. On September 2, 31 BCE, the Battle of Actium began. Antony and Cleopatra's fleet confronted Octavian's navy. Antony planned a fighting retreat, hoping to break through Agrippa's blockade to escape with Cleopatra and the treasury. The battle raged with Antony's large warships against Agrippa's nimble ships. Then Cleopatra broke away from the battle. Antony abandoned his fleet to follow her, demoralizing his forces. Resistance crumbled, and Octavian secured a total victory. The Battle of Actium was a disaster, leaving Octavian the master of the Roman world. Antony and Cleopatra returned to Alexandria defeated. The news of their loss at Actium spread, and their court was replaced by fear. They knew Octavian would soon arrive. Antony retreated from public life. Cleopatra focused on survival, preparing for invasion and concern for her children. She sent Caesarion away and offered to abdicate to Octavian. Octavian advanced, wanting total surrender. Octavian's legions arrived, and Antony's army deserted. As Octavian's forces entered Alexandria, Antony, hearing a false rumor of Cleopatra's death, fell on his sword. He died in Cleopatra's arms. Octavian entered the city and took Cleopatra prisoner, intending to parade her in his triumph. With Mark Antony dead and Octavian in control, Cleopatra faced her final moments. She tried to use her charm during an audience with Octavian, but he was immune. He wanted her alive for his Roman triumph. For Cleopatra, this was a fate worse than death. Cleopatra made her decision to avoid this humiliation. She arranged for a basket of figs to be brought to her, hiding venomous asps. She wrote a final letter to Octavian, asking to be buried beside Antony. Octavian's guards found her dead, dressed as a queen. He granted her final wish, burying her with Antony. With her death, 3,000 years of pharaonic rule ended and Egypt became a Roman province. Following his victory, Octavian, who would soon be known as Augustus, the first Roman emperor, cemented his power by controlling the narrative of the war. The propaganda that had been so effective in turning Rome against Antony and Cleopatra now became the official, accepted history. This version of events, written by the victors, deliberately minimized Cleopatra's political acumen and her role as a capable ruler. Instead, it magnified her persona as a seductive, decadent, and dangerous foreign temptress. She was cast as the ultimate other, a corrupting Eastern influence who had lured a noble Roman general to his doom. This mythologized image was crucial for justifying the civil war and legitimizing Augustus's new regime. This Roman caricature has had a profound and lasting impact on how Cleopatra has been remembered for centuries. Poets like Horace and Virgil, writing under the patronage of Augustus, immortalized her as a fatal monster and a crazed queen. This hostile portrayal was passed down through generations, shaping her image in the Western imagination. She became a symbol not of political intelligence but of dangerous female sexuality and ambition. For nearly 2,000 years, this was the dominant lens through which her story was told. The real woman, the skilled diplomat, The brilliant linguist, the shrewd economic reformer, and the devoted mother was largely buried beneath layers of Roman slander and sensationalism. It was not until much later, with the rise of modern historical inquiry and a re-examination of ancient sources, that a more nuanced picture began to emerge. Scholars started to look beyond the Roman accounts, piecing together evidence from coins, temple reliefs, and the writings of Greek historians like Plutarch who, while still dramatic, offered a more balanced perspective. They began to see past the myth and recognize the formidable political operator who had successfully navigated the treacherous world of Roman power politics for over 2 decades. This revised understanding reveals a leader of immense substance, whose reign was defined by intelligence and resilience, not just romance and tragedy. Despite this academic reassessment, the legend of the seductive queen remains incredibly powerful. The story of her passionate affairs with 2 of the most powerful men of her age, her dramatic entrances, and her tragic end, is simply too compelling to be forgotten. The myth and the reality of Cleopatra have become intertwined, creating a figure who is both a historical ruler and a timeless archetype. She represents the eternal struggle for power, the clash of cultures, and the complex interplay of love and politics. It is this duality that makes her so endlessly fascinating, a queen whose true character we are still trying to uncover from beneath the weight of her own legend. More than 2 millennia after her death, Cleopatra remains one of the most famous figures in history. Her name transcends the past, continuing to capture the global imagination. She's been the subject of countless books, plays, poems, operas, paintings, and films. Her story has become a universal canvas for exploring themes of power, love, ambition, and defiance. Cleopatra's story is a timeless reminder of the power of agency. Even her final act was a choice, a defiant assertion of control over her own fate. In the end, she lost her war, her kingdom, and her life, but won a form of immortality. Her legacy continues to fascinate, inspire, and provoke us to this day.